Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we have a special one for you. Today, we're going to be doing a Hall of Fame episode for Summon Scorpion Beastmaster. So, for the longest of time, people have been harassing me and wanting me to play Summon Scorpion for the longest of times now, but I am a firm believer of if someone else does it better than you, you might as well just let them do it. And in this case, Cookbook made a guide based on Summon Scorpion, and it's really good, and I felt like there was no need for me to actually make a guide on it, because why would I make something that's just worse than what's already out there? Because, you know, it's already been done. I might as well take all of my time and work on other stuff, as I have plenty of things to work on last epoch-wise, and I let Cookbook focus on the Summon Scorpion shenanigans. And now we can finally make a video, and instead of me making a video of it myself, I thought I'd bring the guy on and we can talk about it more in detail. So go ahead, Cookbook, introduce yourself.
So I'm Cookbook. I got into last epoch big time, roughly about just after the second patch before release dropped. Loved Beastmaster, wanted a melee minion build. Eventually found what turned into this build, and played it for 1,000 hours in beta. Remade it in first cycle, played it for 500 hours. So this build has had a lot of tweaking and just optimization put into it, and it's performed really well. I got up to about 900 corruption. I got over 1,000 corruption in beta, topped the Beastmaster arena leaderboards, and I've gotten to 1,000 corruption with a life-based setup, not going into ward in cycle, so the build works extremely well.
So before we get too deep into the weeds here, you want to explain to what's going on the screen here, how the build works and what's going on here before we, get too deep into this?
Yeah, sure. So the primary damage is you have your Summon Scorpion, and its companion skill is Venom Nova, which is a bit of a weird ability. It just delivers poisons. That's all it does. It has no base damage, and it does 3 guaranteed poisons in an area, and fires projectiles, which deliver 1 guaranteed poison and take your Scorpion's poison chance. We want to spam that Nova as much as possible. So what I've done is I've used the cooldown swipe with the Primal Resonance node, which causes your nearest companion to use its companion skill for free, ignoring the cooldown on each swipe. We've got lots of CDR, so we're doing this once every 1.5, 1.4 seconds, and we're using Eterra's Blessing to reset the cooldown and cast it. I set up non-lock autocast, which is a little trick to make your skills autocast on the Nova, so every time I cast Eterra's Blessing, my Scorpion immediately does its Nova. That's the primary damage of the build. Everything else is just buffing the Scorpion, keeping us alive, and just stopping us from dying and keeping on dealing damage.
So do you want to give a quick idea of the differences of how this build feels versus other companion builds, like a quick comparison?
So this build is much more clear oriented in terms of its damage output and everything. You've got your Venom Novas, which deal a lot of damage in an area, and you're spamming that a lot. And unlike a lot of other builds like Summon Sabretooth, it's not really dependent on your companions attacking. Like, your Scorpion just has to be roughly around the enemy for the Nova to hit them and deal damage. Whereas, like Sabretooth, your Sabretooth really has to be attacking a target or something near it for your Sabretooth to really hit it. So it gets around a lot of the pitfalls of companion builds where they generally don't deliver good area. This one does. They generally, minion AI is a little bit scuffed. It's not quite as good as it could be. This gets around that since it's less dependent on your minion doing exactly the right thing,
And you get to press
And
the button too.
yes, it is quite a button intensive build, that's for sure, because like you're swiping, you're doing a Terra's Blessing, you're doing war cries for general sustainability, you're directing your Scorpion with your minion command key, you're using Fury Leap to move around. So it isn't a lazy build. You do have to press a lot of buttons.
There's nothing
But
wrong with
also,
more active minion builds. We need more of those.
yeah. Well, Last Epoch in general is very oriented towards active minion builds away from passive minion builds.
Oh, I was making a slide at Wraith Lord.
Yep. In addition, you have very interesting sustain because you're using triggered heals. You've got Call of the Pack, as well as the heals baked into Fury Leap and Warcry's Tree. So you don't have any health regen, you don't have any leech. Your sustain is entirely based around you pressing buttons, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. Unlike leech, there's not really a situation where you're going into a fight with low health because things died and you didn't get to leech off damage. But also, if you get hit and like stunned, you can die a bit easier than builds that like otherwise have the same EHP but have some passive sustain. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's kind of what you got to deal with because it's just kind of the best option. At least you're not like other minion builds where you don't have either and you don't have triggered heals.
So you are at 1,000 corruption on a life stacking Beastmaster. Do you want to explain your defensive setup for people around? Because it's been a very interesting time in the Last Epoch community, considering everyone's like, oh my god, I can't get to 1,000 corruption on HP. I need to use ward past 200 corruption, otherwise I'll fall over. And here you're playing a build with healing, right? Healing. And you're playing an HP based Beastmaster build in COF, mind you, at 1,000 corruption. Yep. You want to explain what your defensive setup is like?
Yeah, sure. So life-based, obviously, you stack health. I've got around 3k health with this setup. If I was on a two-handed variant, I'd be sitting possibly close to 4k due to Titan Heart. I've got capped endurance, obviously, using the new, the changed in 1.0 Ancestral Crown base for Primalist, with the maximum health gained as endurance threshold. That's an absolutely cracked base, by the way. The bases added in 1.0 are insane. I've got 7.5k armor just from the high armor bases, plus I've got about 86 strength, so a lot of percentage increased armor. And armor, the armor and reduced bonus damage taken from critical hits affixes. We're using Aspect of the Boar, as any Primalist does. It's just a crazy DR package, along with Earth Sign Strength, and the Berserker node in the main Primalist tree. People look at this node and immediately think, oh, low life, don't worry about it if you're health based. No, this node is insane. Or take it on any Primalist build, pretty much. The only thing is if you're somehow generating ward without being low life, which there's not many of those in Primalist.
Yeah. One of the strengths I'd like to point out real quick before we move on is one of the reasons why the Beastmaster setup works so well is because there's a node inside Warcry that gives you tripled healing if you are below 35% health, which is generally around when all of the endurance DR stuff exists for stuff like a Beastmaster, right? So not only are you, of course, getting way tankier, your Warcry literally heals you to full every single time you press it with just a little bit of investment. I would like to point out that that is a very strong node for setups like this. So I
for
see that.
sure.
I see that you have a Bastion of Honor. You want to
Yep.
explain that?
I'll be stacking strength. Like, there's honestly a Bastion Honor with block effectiveness slam is a really good shield. Like, if you look at the stats, obviously this got nerfed. It used to be you used Bastion. Like, if you had a Bastion going into monos, you just used it because it was crazy good. It got nerfed. Now it's pretty niche. You need to be stacking strength. A lot of things don't stack strength. It's not a common attribute stacking just because the classes which use strength generally need to use more attributes on it, like other attributes as well. So we've got a Bastion, an 86 strength. We've got capped block, 100% block against things within 4 meters. T7 block effectiveness, that raises our block mitigation to 44%. This is the best defensive thing we could have in this slot. You could also run Cradle, but that would take extra investment as you've got no other block steroids in Prime List. You would have to invest probably a glove suffix, plus the blessing, get the block blessing instead of armor, instead of increased armor from Age of Winter, and you would end up with a little bit less block effectiveness, and you need to hit T7 block chance on a well rolled percentage block from Golden Aegis Cradle. In addition, you might not get a useful other stat, and in that case, you're just worse off. So Bastion of Honor is the best defensive thing to have in this slot, and you don't really have a good offensive thing to put here. So
Also,
that's the
another
reason for
thing,
Bastion.
I see that you're doing a tech where you're utilizing Cleaver Solution only so that you can cap for a double red ring setup. I find that very hilarious.
Yes. Well, Cleaver Solution is still one of the better one-handed weapons for this build, even if I wasn't using red rings. It gives strength. It gives level of all skills. Like, you don't have many weapons which give useful, unique bonuses in this for this build. The other option that I would mainly consider is Tempest Maw for strength and attunement. But you still lose the +1 to all skills, and you need a little bit more attribute investment than I have to activate red rings with that. So technically, with full optimization into attributes, Tempest Maw might be the better option. But at the same time, +1 level to all skills is nice. It's not as nice as it is in some builds. I don't really need the +1 levels to, say, Swipe or Fury Leap, or even kind of Warcry. But it's still like +1 level to Summon Scorpion, +1 level to a Terra's Blessing. Those are nice.
One of the most interesting things I've noticed about COF so far is getting a red ring in Merchant's Guild is an expensive endeavor. Obviously, if you play a lot like I do, you could buy them. But for a casual player, it seems like as though red rings are way easier to access in COF than it is in Merchant's Guild. Because it seems like as though you can just spam the ring prophecies once you get to like 10 or whatever, like rank 10, and just print rings until you just get double red ring. It's a very interesting dynamic considering, like you would think Merchant's Guild would have easier access. No, in this case, red ring's way easier to get in COF.
Yeah. Red rings, I got my red rings in a week. I got a random drop red ring. You'll see my red rings are actually different in the planner.
Yeah, I see that.
I got a random drop red ring, and then was just like, I might as well get a second one. So I just went and farmed ring prophecies for a few days and got it within a week. So yeah, red rings, much easier to access than they were in beta. I actually spent months farming for a red ring in beta and did not get one. And that was by farming caches for Runes of Ascendancy to ascend full stash tabs of rings. I ascended 4 full stash tabs of rings, and plus saw maybe 100 unique ring drops from Thief Lord caches, and I still didn't get a red ring.
And people ask me, Dread, why do you keep saying the power creep has gone up insanely so?
Yeah, like pre 1.0, Uber rares were almost not farmable. Runes of Ascendancy from those caches were like the only reasonable farming method for Uber rares.
Yeah, like if
Now
I were to if I were to look at your gear last patch, and I also like just look at it and be like, how long did it take you to get this? And like I'm looking at it now, I'm just looking at it casually. I'm just that looks normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last gear
It's
piece
fine.
I'm interested in. So you're utilizing an Urzel's Pride. You want to explain why you're using an Urzel's Pride to everybody?
So for this build in particular, and this is like a very specific thing, Urzel's Pride actually gives us a bunch of stats we want. It's got good base armor. Like, this is comparable to some of the better Primalist bases. It's got slightly better armor than an Ancestral Garb. So, good base armor, that's great. It's got, it's got strength, 9 to 15 strength.
Oh, 15,
That's
yeah.
pretty good. Like, that's what, that's equivalent to T6?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Wow. Somewhere between tier 5 and 6. And it gives us a bunch of mana regen. And this build is quite mana intensive. If you look at a Terra's Blessing, it ends up in my build. Obviously, you can't see it because in the planner, because the planner doesn't quite account for increases and whatnot to mana. But the mana cost of Venom Nova plus a Terra's Blessing is not trivial. You do end up spending 40 to 50 mana every time you cast a Terra's Blessing on your Scorpion. So this mana regen, plus the fact, like, we get a bunch of lightning res from the Ending the Storm timeline, because there is nothing else we care about on that set of blessings, means that we actually get a sizable chunk of lightning res for absolutely free. On a unique, we can get a bunch of LP on. That gives us a bunch of strength that we would want anyway. So that's why we use Urzel's Pride. Technically, if you go up like a rarity bracket and you're looking at 4 LP Urzel's Pride, technically LP3 Titanheart is better for the one-handed setup, but I haven't found a 4 LP Urzel's Pride or a 3 LP Titanheart, so...
Yeah, even there are some things, even with all of this power creep, that you still don't get to see, and that's definitely a 3LP, Titanheart, even in trade, is annoying as hell.
Yeah.
So one more thing I want to talk about before we end this video here is every time I seem to talk with you, we end up seem to be shitting on Serpent Strike. So I want to take this moment here. I don't want you to use your platform here now to explain to people why Serpent Strike is terrible for this build and why it is effectively a noob trap. Go ahead, you have the stand.
Okay, Serpent Strike in this build, I guess there is technically a reason you would use Serpent Strike, and it's because you don't want to have to care where your Scorpion is. Casting a Terra's Blessing on your Scorpion does require moving your mouse near your Scorpion. So if you're really lazy and wouldn't be doing that, don't want to do that, you can do it. But the Venom Novas from Serpent Strike are terrible. If you look at the node, it's a 12-second cooldown. That means you're getting, one Nova every 6 seconds? Effectively?
Pretty much.
A Terra's Blessing is basically giving us 1 Nova every 1.5 seconds.
Or as much as you have mana sustain, yeah.
With this build, now, especially now that I just got this helmet, that's in the build planner, and I swapped 8 strength over to 8 attunement. For bosses, you'll see the majority of the time I'm doing 1 swipe, 2 blessings. And I haven't looked at how many novas that is a second, but it's far, far more than Serpent Strike gives. So, Terra's Blessing, massively more novas, which will just mean more damage. And then you've got stuff like, Terra's Blessing is giving you 150% poison chance. That is a significant chunk of poison chance, which applies to your Scorpion's melee attacks as well. Like, your Scorpion's melee attacks end up accounting for 40% of your poison damage. There's also stuff like Purge, which cleanses ailments on your Scorpion. Very useful for monos with chill or slow. Because having your minions be lagging behind you a ton is awful. And then there's the swift recovery node, which you'll see in some of my boss kills is extremely useful. In higher corruption, while your Scorpion is very tanky, it will die to bosses dropping big DOT areas. And it's very hard to pull minions out of those in this game. They don't respond particularly well when they already have a target they're attacking. So, especially at ones like bosses where the area they'll aggro onto them from a command is very large. So this node just completely remedies the issue of your companions dying and you having to be near them to revive. A lot of the solo companion builds have that issue where in higher corruption, just minion survivability becomes a huge issue. This build does not have that. If your minion dies, you cast Blessing twice and it's back up. So that's why why Serpent Strike isn't good. It gets rid of a bunch of quality of life, it gets rid of a bunch of damage, it limits your weapon choices. I'm using a one-handed setup. You can't use Serpent Strike with a one-handed setup. I'm pretty sure the one-handed setup is better overall, and you can easily build adapt the build to cover Terra's Blessing. The attunement investment that you would save from going Serpent Strike just isn't actually that effectively invested. So, yeah, it's just not worth it.
All right, and the last thing I want to talk about, sorry to keep you on for so long here, but the last thing I want to talk about is cycle starter capabilities. This is insane as a cycle starter, right?
It's extremely good. This build, all the uniques you see aren't needed for cycle start. You could have a totally exalt build, not even optimized, be doing 300, 350 corruption, be doing T4 bosses. The idols don't need super high optimization. You just chuck on whatever gets increased aspect. The Viper effect, you get your healing effectiveness from an amulet, and you're good. You can just optimize from there. You're still doing 300, 350 corruption. It's super easy, super simple. The build starts from level 28 and is a very good campaign build. It's just, you use this build the entire time. It's so good.
Perfect. Now, to get to your guide, of course, you have it on the LE planner, correct?
Yep.
There'll be a link down below to that. And with all that being said, thank you, Cookbook, for coming around and preaching the Summon Scorpion meta to us all, too blind to see it. Thank you so much for that.
Yep, no problem. Just people don't fall for the tree rat propaganda. Squirrels are mid and always have been.
All right. Let's end it here.